Okay, we're live. Very happy to introduce the new voice panel. It's reduced to one person at the moment, but we are expecting our second person soon. So Steph, start us off with an introduction to you and your books.
Hi, I'm Steph. Steph's fine, but Stephanie Sowden is my name on the books. I have, we've got Jess. My first novel came out yesterday, so still riding off high of publication day. It's called After Everything You Did, and it is a crime thriller about a girl who wakes up in hospital with no memories and is told she's one of the FBI's most wanted killers, basically. And it's about her journey finding out about herself and why she might have done these things and if she did do them.
Wonderful. And Jess?
Yeah, apologies for being late. Technical issues, always technical issues. So, hi, I'm Jess. I'm the author of this book, The Girl She Was Before. It's my debut thriller, and it looks at the lasting legacy of a trauma like bullying. So my main character, Nat, lives in a town called Coral Bay, and she her biggest nemesis, the biggest bully from when she was at school, comes back to town at the same time, coincidentally, as a range of murders are happening. And as kind of time goes on, it starts to look like Nat's the person potentially doing it, and there are twists and turns.
Well, this sounds good. Sam has just said hello, Kaz, Stephanie, and Jess. She's had excited messages from members about this interview.
Oh, that's good to hear.
It is good to hear, isn't it? Start us off by introducing us to your main sort of character in your books. Tell us a little bit about the main.
First, so my main character she's called Rita, and she's called Rita Doe because they don't know what her last name is, but they do know her name is Rita because they've had witnesses who have met her through over the previous 6 months, and she's always been the last person seen with the victims. So they know her name. So she is basically a sort of brand new slate, and she's very sort of cut up about the fact that she might have done these things and coming to terms with, as the sort of case progresses, and then when she eventually goes to trial, she obviously has heard all the details of the stories of these killings, and she really feels very lost and feels that inside she's good, and so doesn't understand how she could have done these things. My secondary characters are Willow, who's the FBI agent, Agent Willow, and then Carol, who is a journalist, and her and Rita develop a relationship. She's been writing about Rita, and so Rita decides to contact her, thinking that she might have some inside information on her and like has she spoken to her family or anything like that. And then they create a really strong like friendship, which is really one of the driving relationships of the book. And at first it's Carol dealing with, could she like this person who she knows has done these things? And then we kind of get Carol coming to terms with it. And Carol is the person who eventually helps her track down her family and what happened and her upbringing, which is spoiler alert, so I won't spoil it.
Fair enough. And Jack?
So my main character is a woman called Nat, who was really badly bullied when she was younger, and kind of her experiences just shape so much of who she is, and kind of those insecurities that were instilled in her when she was younger carry her through her adult life, and she's kind of reinvented herself and this kind of influencer and has this perfect life. But then as soon as her old tormentor comes back, she kind of just falls apart because it reminds her of everything that she used to be and that she feels she's trying so hard to not be. And then at the same time, kind of her friendship group is slowly being killed off one by one, and all those things, like the contributing factors, just make her, she becomes quite an unstable character and a little bit unreliable, sometimes does things that you're like, why are you doing that? But she's she's just someone that is so kind of hurt by her past kind of trauma with how she was bullied.
We've got some more hellos coming in. So Francesca, Leslie Lloyd, Daniel McBreakneck has posted a nice review of your book, Jess. In the book
I'm like, I recognise these names, hey.
David Monaghan Jones are all saying hello.
Hello.
Hey.
What's it been like having your debut book out? So it's most fresh for you, Stephanie, isn't it? But
yeah, it is.
You've been watching all your reviews come in.
Yeah, it's been weird. So it came on NetGalley, which is where you could request advance copies in January. And in a weird way, it felt like it was out then because you start to get reviews in. And so it feels a bit weird that it's now out and everyone can read it. So it's been really nice seeing the really nice reviews, and I've had a blog tour this week, and getting tagged in nice reviews has been lovely. And my publishers have been really good at sending over like the nice quotes, and also from other authors as well, which always just feels very special because they're other writers. So yeah, it's been really surreal and strange, and now having people I know saying that they've just started it is like, oh god, okay. But yeah, it's nice to getting the nice reviews in, but I try not to read them too much because I feel like if other people don't like it, that's fine. It doesn't have to be for everyone, but I don't need to know about it, is my opinion.
Fair enough. What about you, Jess?
Yeah, it's been, well, my book's been out a little bit longer since October and things, and I feel like it's only just now sunk in that it's been out. I remember, like you were saying, when you get the kind of the advanced reviews, you're like, do I dare look? Do I dare look? It's this really nervous feeling because you put so much of your like heart and soul into it, and you just, it's amazing when you get to actually chat to readers. Like the best bit has been kind of connecting with readers and talking to readers about it, but it definitely feels surreal, like a lifelong dream and goal, and then you have your book in your hands, and I think at first I was like, someone take it from me, this can't be real, but now I'm accepting it.
Yeah. I kept checking my name was spelled right, and I sent it to my sister, and she was like, you're actually asking if your name's spelled right on the front. I was like, yeah, I forgot how to spell it. Is it spelled right?
Yeah.
It is.
It's such a thing, isn't it? I was like, do I become Jess? I am Jess. Do I be Jessica? Oh, who do I be?
Sam has asked what inspired you both to start writing your debut, and what was your path to publication?
So for me, I've pretty much always written, not professionally, but just as a hobby, and started writing probably crime novels when I was in my early 20s, just as a kind of, hobby for me. Never really thought anything would happen with it. And so for this one, she kind of just wandered into my head, did Rita, in like the summer of 2019. So it's been like 2.5 years. And so I just started writing it, and I think it was a lot of things that inspired me for this book. There's sort of, I was interested by the element of like nature versus nurture. You know, this character is basically fresh and innocent, and generally you should like this character, but you know that she's done these things, but it almost seems like a different person. So I was really inspired by that, and that really interested me, and that sort of tracked through in other stuff I've written. And I think, I think just from having written quite a bit before, you kind of start to build up your own process and how you plot your book and everything like that. And so there was something about this one as I was writing, I was like, this one feels good, which the other stuff never did feel good. And so, path to publication, I started submitting to agents, and I got my agent in like February of 2021. And then we went out on submission to publishers, and I got 2 offers, and it probably took about 4 months to get the offers in from publishers. And then I decided I wanted to go with Canelo Crime quite quickly. And from there it's been all quite quick, and you get your edits, and then you get your cover, and then all this other stuff starts happening, and before you know it, it's out.
And you, Jess?
My inspiration, I'm not sure if you can see in this lovely like natural lighting, I have a facial birthmark kind of here, and I've always written a bit like you, Stephanie. I've always been a writer, always enjoyed writing, but I remember I do sometimes advocacy work for people with facial differences and kind of about birthmarks, and I was just talking about some of my experiences, and the lady interviewing me was like, I'm so sorry you were bullied when you were younger. And I was like, oh, I was never bullied. I had loads of friends. I felt really loved, but some of the experiences I have really impacted me. And it was that moment where I reflected and was like, well, whenever I'm really down on myself, or, you know, when you look in a mirror and you're like, you're ugly, it's never my voice I hear. It's always the voice of the people that told me those things. And then I just remember reflecting and being like, well, what if you were someone that were bullied? What if you were someone that you had gone through that and you felt that you'd been through that? How would that impact you? How would your insecurities play out? How would they affect you in your real life? And I think it just kind of spiraled from there. And then pretty similar story, like I started writing it a few years ago. I was signed to one agency, and then there was a staffing change and I got let go, which was pretty hard to bounce back from. But then eventually it's all worked out well, and I've met my publisher, Kingsley Publishers, and yeah, just relieved to be here. But it was a long journey and a bit of an up and down journey, but it's definitely worth it in the end.
Sounds it. Francesca has asked, what books or authors inspired you to write crime? That's a really good question.
Oh, I don't know. Weirdly for me, when I started thinking about writing full books, and I don't know if this just says a lot about my brain, I just thought, obviously it's got to be crime. And I was like, I don't know how else to structure another book. Like, obviously there's got to be a crime and you've got to have something to say about it. I think it's something about it just being the most kind of removed from my personal life. And for me, writing is, I've never written about what I know. I've never written about my own personal life. It's always been like an escape. And crime, I'm very fortunate. I've never been a victim of crime, and I promise I'm not a perpetrator either of crime. And I think it's really interesting. But I mean, obviously I'm inspired by loads of crime writers. I love Tana French. I think she's brilliant. And I really love, one of my favorite books is The Truth About the Harry Quebette Affair. And they're just really detailed, like nuanced stories, which I love. And not that I think mine is anywhere near as good as those, but mine follows that trend a little bit. It's a bit slower paced. It's not quite like punchy action. It's a little bit more of like a emotive story, which I think that those writers especially as well really kind of pull into their work, which I love.
What about you, Jess?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. That I feel like whenever I get asked this question, I suddenly go blank on every writer I've ever heard of. But a bit like you, similarly, crime writing, crime books are my favourite ones to read. I love a twist. I'm just a fan of a twist. And I like to think I'm quite a sweet person, definitely not a perpetrator of crime. So it's kind of fun to write those kind of twisted characters. I love making characters that are a little bit not always that nice, or they do things that you're like, oh, why would you do that? I think people like Lisa Jewell, I can imagine having a career like Lisa Jewell. She is just incredible. I really like Elle Croft. She does really great books. Sally Hepworth. There are just so many fantastic writers out there. Shari Lapina. I think I'm just listing people now, but they're definitely the ones that if ever they have a new release, I'm like, yep, buying that one.
They're what I call my shut up and take my money authors.
Yes, that's the perfect way of putting it. Yes,
they're like the ones you're just gonna buy. Like, it doesn't matter. Just got the name on, so you know it's going to be good.
Yeah,
and they never disappoint. I've never had one that I'm like, that wasn't that good. I just love them all.
That's the thing about one of those authors is you know you're in safe hands. And if you want a book, you're just like, I want to be taken away. Then yeah.
Mm.
And it's nice to read one, and then they've got a back catalogue that you can then just, you don't have to wait for the new one. You can just get all the others.
And you try and read them really slowly to make it last.
Also, why you'd never have any money if you're a bookworm like me.
Yeah.
Because you have too many of those authors. So Francesca also wants to know if you have any favourite real life crime cases. And then I said, is favourite the right word?
Yeah.
I love it.
God, I feel like I have loads. I feel like my entire phone is just podcasts of these kind of cases. I mean, there's a podcast called Paradise on the BBC, and it was about, it's actually about two people from near me in South Manchester in the 70s, and it's a couple, and they went traveling, and then they disappeared off this yacht in, I think, St. Bart's or something. And no one really knew what happened. And because of all the jurisdictional difficulties, there's kind of British police trying to get involved and trying to track down what happened to these people. And obviously their families really advocating for it. But then the local police on the ground don't really have much interest in it. They're just two tourists that they're like, well, probably they just got on a boat and they went somewhere else. Like, we don't know. And it's a really interesting case. And they end up on a trail to this serial killer in America, and it just gets wrapped up in the most, like, you're listening to every episode like, oh my god, what is this? So that's a really good, I really love that crime case is like an interesting, like, just one that just takes a left turn in every episode, and you're like, I can't believe it's real.
Yeah, I want to watch that or listen to that. That sounds amazing.
11 episodes, and I thought at first that's really long for a crime podcast, but nope, it needs it.
See, I wish I was into crime podcasts more, but I actually, as a person, I'm quite squeamish. So when I hear them, I'm like, oh, that's so sad. But I like imagining it, which is a weird thing. I feel like my case would be, I'm from Bradford. I feel like the Yorkshire Ripper. That's got to be like up there. I would love to write something about that kind of idea of the perfect victim and how, when you're someone that, I don't know, when you've worked in an industry, like when they were prostitutes, the police were like, nope, it's fine. And just that whole thing, I'd love to explore that kind of, the idea of the perfect victim and how that gets the coverage and the attention. But what about the other people that don't kind of fit in that, perfect rounded mold? Yeah, I feel like that would be my dream case.
There's a really good non-fiction book called The Five, which is about not the Yorkshire Ripper, but it's about Jack the Ripper's victims, but it looks at their lives rather than it being about
really good
what he did, if you know what I mean. And I think that's really
interesting.
It looks at them from a different way.
Yeah, that's really, I've listened to that on Audible. And then there's another good true crime book called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which is about the Golden State Killer in California in the 70s, who was just horrific, like horrible. But he was never caught. And then there's a journalist who was actually married to Patton Oswalt, the actor, and she wrote this book about it, and she was basically really instrumental in tracking him down. And the way they tracked him down was through the DNA profiles, with like Ancestry.com and 23andMe.
Oh wow.
And they got this guy's DNA, but he'd never committed another crime, so they never had a profile on the police. And so she basically just did all this work, like building family trees based on this thing. And it's really clever, like the way it's solved in the end. And then he was arrested 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I
feel like I'm just picking up so many recommendations from this. I need to make a list of all these things.
Notepad. We'll send you lists of things after.
Please do.
Leslie said she doesn't like true crime. She wants to think it's only made up.
I think I'm like Leslie. I am like you. If it's real, it keeps me up at night. But when it's imagined, I'm like, that's fine. Someone was just having a bad day when they wrote that, and they put it all onto the page and made something great.
It's like a fantasy book.
So let's talk research. What was the research like for your books, and what's like the most interesting kind of rabbit hole you went down while you were researching for them?
Yeah, for me, I had a lot of research because Rita's upbringing is based on a real life case. So I've refrained from mentioning this podcast because I think it might be spoiler alert if I do. But I listened to the podcast on it, and it really inspired her background. And then so I did a lot of reading on that. And also a lot of historical research because it's set in the 60s in America. So it is what I did my degree on as well. So I have an interest in it, and I have loads of books on it and stuff. But I think in terms of rabbit holes, just Googling things did they have polystyrene coffee cups in the 60s? Before I wrote a character with a takeaway coffee, I was like, why did they have a takeaway coffee in the 60s? It's all these little details. If you're writing historical, I texting my parents did they have this when you were growing up? Did this exist? Or am I just making it up that it existed? So especially with the historical details, and then a lot of the sort of the civil rights movements and stuff like that, because I have a mixed race character. So it's a lot about her, her kind of relationship in the world. And yeah, so I had a lot of historical research to get through.
That sounds amazing. But my research was a little bit different to that, as in I think the biggest element of mine is the bullying side of things, or just the impact of that and that psychological impact. And I think as someone that's kind of, like I say, it has a facial difference, I think it's something you want to get right. You never want to kind of downplay how that can make people feel, or downplay situations and the impact that can have. So I feel like because I've worked quite a lot in advocacy or I'm surrounded by those kind of messages of, if that you can talk about it and stuff, I feel like a lot of my kind of research I kind of picked up by osmosis in just a lot of the things that I kind of naturally navigate in. And I guess a lot of personal experience comes through in what I was writing, but I'd say my research was more on just definitely making sure I felt like I'd got that part of the book right and I'd done justice to those experiences.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're working on now? Because I'm presuming you're both on book 2.
Yeah, my book 2 that I've already sent in, so I should be getting my edits back for it in the next couple of weeks. So I'm now working on it's an out of contract book, so we'll have to go on submission and do the whole thing again. So it may never get published, who knows? But it's what I hope could be the start of a series, and it's the first sort of proper mystery I've plotted that starts with a murder, and then it's someone investigating it and like following the clues and trying to find out what happened. My book 2 is similar to my first book in that you kind of know who's done it, so it's more about the why of people have done it, and then this one is like a proper mystery, and it's set in a hotel in the 60s London, so like swinging 60s in Soho, and it's been really fun to write because it feels a bit more lighthearted than the sort of emotional, psychological exploration of why people do these things, and a bit of a cozy crime romp throughout the swinging 60s London, which has been fun.
Well, you need to let me know when that comes out because I'll be placing a pre-order. I'm already sold. I'm at a similar point to you. I've just kind of sent mine off. I've literally just got my kind of edits, but I'm in England at the minute. So I was like, I'll do them when I get back and kind of when I'm not traveling. But yeah, it's kind of hard to say without giving things away. It's a little bit more maybe psychological than the first one, and explores more of a relationship, and it's got some themes about kind of cheating, like lies, but then it also kind of goes into I can't think of the word, kind of how someone's using social media to be a different person. And yeah, I think that's all I can say without giving too much away. My publisher's like, don't say anything yet. I'm like, My main character's called Cassie. I can say that one.
Sam's asked if any of your characters have developed in ways you didn't expect as you wrote them.
Yeah, all mine do. They just do what they want. I'm not really a plotter. I just kind of come up with a vague idea, and then they basically do the work for me. So yes, I think I had a firm idea on Rita, but when I first had the idea for the book, I thought she was going to be a bit more sinister and sort of a bit more manipulative. And actually, when I started writing her, I realized that she wasn't. She was very soft-hearted and kind of just hurt and upset by the things that she'd done. She didn't have this hard edge that I first thought she would have, which was a nice exploration and really actually affected the rest of the book because it kind of built around that.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like my main character kind of went into it with this total vision of like, she's just going to be like this, you know, when you do your character outline and you draw a picture of her and you're like, yeah, that's what she will be. But then kind of as time went on, I feel like it was nice to actually really explore kind of the impact, like I say, of the bully and how it kind of manifested in this woman that on paper you're like, she has everything together, she's this, like, you know, got it all sorted out. And I think it was really interesting to just be like, I'm going to put you in this situation, how would you react to this person I've invented? But it was that kind of, a lot of it came from those insecurities that I really felt like Nat's character drew out of herself. So actually some of the scenes, I'm a bit of a pantser too, not a planner, and some of the scenes were just kind of off the cuff with what happened, because I was like, I feel like the character's almost saying this is what should happen.
No, you've got a 2-part question here. So I'm going to ask you the last bit first, which is, can people visit the locations in your books?
Yes, but they would have to go to America. I've kind of, I suppose if you read it and you figure out what it's based on, I believe that the site of the real case is a bit of a sort of one of those dark tourist things, which I don't think I would ever want to go to, but I think it's one of those dark tourist places. But it's very fictionalized in the book, and all the towns and the prison that Rita goes to, they're all completely fictionalized. I think I was very aware that I don't live there, and I didn't want to just like pick a random town and then be like, oh great, you've put that on us, have you? So I very much fictionalized all the names. I mean, you know, they do go to New York and stuff in it, which is real. But the general theme of it is it's sort of like a road trip across the American South. So you could just go and do a road trip across the American South.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll sign up. I'll do a road trip across the American South. I'm fine with that.
If we do it for work.
Yeah, like it's research. Mine is set in a fictional place called Coral Bay. Coral Bay can be wherever you'd like it to be. It can be somewhere you can pretend you can go visit. I don't mind. There is a place in Australia called Coral Bay, but I didn't base it on there. But a company called Tea Leaves and Reads, I sell my books through them. They've got book boxes, and there's a wax melt of Coral Bay, which we designed like how we imagined like a coastal place would smell. So if you ever fancied almost pretending you were at this place, you could get one of those, light your wax melt and close your eyes and just imagine what it was like.
Detail. I like that.
Yeah, it was fun to do. I was like, what does Coral Bay smell like? Let me think.
And then the other part of that question was, have you visited locations from books?
Oh, from real books, as in not mine, which I still think is made up and just in my brain. I don't think I have ever visited, or not purposefully for it to be a book. Interestingly, a friend of mine, but her book came out a few weeks ago, called Stonebroke Heiress, which is a rom-com set in Liverpool, and it's set in a place called Toxteth, which is where my sister used to live. So I kind of preemptively visited all those places, and I read it, and I was like, I know all these places. I get the description. She's been really good at like putting in the real locations. So if you live in Liverpool and you're a rom-com fan, I recommend that. So that was nice to sort of be able to see where I was in this fictional book.
I love that. I feel like I'm the same, not intentionally, but not when you go to London and you're like, oh, Sherlock Holmes, and you kind of you pointed out. Or definitely, I've been reading a few Leanne Moriarty books, and when I'm in Sydney, I'm like, oh, I know that street, I know that place. But I would love to do one a bit more. I once did with uni like a Ted Hughes tour around Yorkshire, and we went and did that, and we saw like Sylvia Plath's grave and stuff. It was actually really fun, so I feel like that would be quite a fun thing to get more into, actually.
I've done a few. I'm that kind of a book nerd that I will go to somewhere.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Well,
where have you been?
Working on in London. I used to work in Soho when I used to live down in London, and that one I feel like is very infused with real places, which is the first time I've done it, because before I just fictionalized everything. But it does feel, when you kind of recognize the place. And now you said, I've read a couple of books based in Sydney, and I've been out there to visit friends, and they always seem to be real, and you're like, I've been there, I remember that.
I've been, where have I been? I've been to some of the ones in the Da Vinci Code, but mostly because I've been in Paris and I could. I've been to Holy Islands and looked at all the places where Louise Ross has done things. I've been to the Millennium office that's been reconstructed in Stockholm.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, you've done a few. This is impressive.
And then I've read some things based on where I've been as well, if that makes sense.
It's nice to recognize the places.
Yeah, it's like when you watch a TV show and you're like, I've been there.
Sam says a successful visit of hers was Roald Dahl's house and local area. That was an amazing day.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I would love to do that, actually. That's a fair point. Should we do an organised trip? Let's all go to Roald Dahl's house.
Yeah. I know. As well in in England that you can, because I've been to the Sherlock Holmes, like 221 B Bay Street and the Sherlock Holmes Museum down in London, which is just that exciting anyway. And all that kind of stuff.
And Sam said she asked a guard in the Louvre in Paris where the Last Supper was housed, and he chuckled as he told her not Paris. I think this is David Monaghan Jones. I'm just going to look, but it is. He's asked if either of you have any police contacts you use to help with procedures and investigation techniques.
Not for after everything you did. That was basically done a lot on me researching it and Googling it and going through lots of archives of like how the FBI did procedures back in the 60s and stuff like that. But there is another author called Tina Orr-Monroe, whose book is out next week, and she used to be a scene of crime officer. And she's been really helpful with other stuff I've written, just like the little details to message and say, would they bag this now? Or like, would this person do it? Or would that person do it? And that's always useful. And there's also I've got a book as well that's written by, there's a consultancy that's run by, I think, ex-police officers. And so I've got their book, and they do a service as well where you can like send them your manuscript, which I haven't done because I've been mainly set in America so far. But I think if I were to write a sort of maybe more modern one, then I would definitely use that, because you want to make sure you're getting it right.
Yeah, I feel like my side of things was a little bit more, the police are in it, obviously it's a crime, they're not just like murders have happened, okay, but mine's more kind of how they interact with the main character. So a lot of the kind of investigation stuff it's loosely referenced, but it's not, there's never a chapter from the perspective of a detective kind of, I don't know, talking about those kinds of things. So I don't have like a police connection, but my brother works in like the police force, so I feel like there are a few things that I was just like, just gonna ask you this, just in general conversation. He'd be like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, it's fine, just asking this. And then it came out and it was for a book, not just dinner conversation.
I mean, the other thing about writing in the past is that there was a lot of police incompetence, so I can get away with them just like touching evidence and stuff and just not bothering really, and that's what happens. So it's fine. It's accurate.
You could be like 60s. Oh no.
And maybe more of your readers won't know, because it's sort of set in America and stuff. You might get away with it a little bit more.
Yeah. I think there is that element of, although actually on the same, because I think people are as much of an armchair expert as I am, just from having watched sort of 25 seasons of Law and Order and documentaries and all of the crime thing out there. So I think that everyone's probably got the same access to information that I have. So if I have got it wrong, it was the 60s. They did these things back then.
I'll back you up. Yeah, it was the 60s.
So the answers, but is there an expert that you've maybe not been in contact with that you would like to be? Thinking about like future books.
Interesting. I really wanted to, so this sort of ended up not being as big a part of my book as it ended up, but maybe if I'd have I really wanted to speak to someone at the Library of Congress about sort of past Supreme Court cases, because it's right, especially around the 60s, really framed a lot of the legislation around then. And there's a particularly important one which sort of outlawed the death penalty for about 6 years. And I really wanted to speak to somebody about the entire mechanics of how that was undone. And it was slowly undone state by state, and now the death penalty is obviously legal again. And I really want to speak to someone about that. But it became sort of actually just one of these things that I really tried to research as much as possible. And then in the book, it was like one sentence of just like, this is what's happened, and now she's not on death row anymore. And I was like, oh, that's literally all I needed for the book. But I would have happily deep dived into that for hours and hours and hours if I could have.
That can be book 3. That could be that exploration.
Just a thesis on Supreme Court.
Yeah. I feel like, because I've got a loose idea in my mind for what I want my third book to be, and I think, like I was mentioning earlier, kind of the idea of like the perfect victim and stuff. I feel like I want to look at, just reach out and find a little bit more about what kind of supports are offered to people that have been like victims of like really horrific crimes, and like kind of how that happens. So I think I write a little bit of the psychological side. So I'd like to look at kind of how you kind of help and support someone through after that. So I feel like that's a future one. So if anybody knows anybody, please feel free, slide into my DMs.
I've got a couple of friends whose relatives are in the police, and they keep offering up their services, and I'm like, do you know anything about the 60s in America? No? Okay. Well, I'll pass on.
We have a list of experts in the group that you can talk to. So I know some authors just drop like a research question in, and people will help.
That's useful.
This could be dangerous when they're just getting questions, and it's like, look, how do you dispose of a body at 3 a.m. in Woodlands? They're like, okay.
Yeah, I think we would worry if it was something that specific.
You do find your Google searches go. So in I hope will be book 3 that I'm currently writing, and the poison, the method of murder is cyanide poisoning. And honestly, where would you get cyanide from? What is cyanide used for? Buying cyanide. I'm like, I really need to start mixing it up with some other searches before I get like put on a watch list.
Yeah, you need to put something like an author event, so they're like, oh, this person must be an author.
Buying cyanide in fiction.
So talking about
where is the fictional cyanide market?
Yes.
Talking about author events, have you got any books? Are you going to any sort of book festivals or in-person events this year?
I'm going to Harrogate just as a visitor, and then I am hoping to organise some stuff for my paperback release in October. I've contacted a couple of local bookshops near me in South Manchester, and I think paperback is probably the better time to do it because hardback's a bit of a harder sell. So hopefully around October I'll have some more news to do. But yeah.
Exciting. I'm originally English, but I'm based in Australia at the minute, and I feel like this is the first visit home we've had in 3.5 years. So I'm hoping to come back at some point later in the year and kind of line a few things up there and then. But it's been so hard with like lockdowns and things. Well, I had like a in-person book launch planned that then got cancelled and things like that. So hopefully later in the year I can actually come get some stuff done over here. I think this visit I'd love to do more book stuff, but it was one of those ones where you're kind of like cram seeing family in 2 weeks and then fly back. But yeah, I would love to do so much more. The UK's got some incredible events, like such amazing events.
And you've got like such a beautiful bookshop right near you as well, haven't you? You're based in Bradford.
Yeah, Bradford Waterstones. It's just the most beautiful bookshop. Oh, I remember my mum sent me a photo of my book in Bradford Waterstones. I was like, that's it. I've made it, like the most beautiful bookshop. I am completely done. I'm fine now.
Well, then I'll have to track it down.
Oh, honestly, it's stunning.
There'll be pictures in the group. It is absolutely stunning. It's lovely.
And it like smells of coffee and books. I don't know how to describe it. It's just like ingrained into it that it's just coffee and books. It's beautiful.
There's a really I was in Bondi Beach for like 6 months, and there's a place there. I can't remember what it's called, Alice and something, and it's like a cafe in a bookshop. And I would just spend the whole time there. It's just amazing, and I was obsessed with it. And then I came back and I was like, I'm going to open up my own cafe bookshop in Manchester.
Isn't it the dream? A cafe bookshop. It just is the dream. Like, I know where you mean. Though they do like author events, just all this fun stuff.
Yeah.
I would come to your one in Manchester.
You've got a message from David Monaghan Jones, Jess. He said I'm just going to read it out because it's really helpful.
Okay.
He said he was a family liaison officer supervisor, both during murder investigations and keeping in touch after trials and convictions. So you're welcome to DM him as and when that features in your writing. And he did 10 years covering Bradford as well.
Oh, amazing! Oh, thank you so much. And you also have Bradford knowledge as well. We can talk about Waterstones. We can do all this stuff. That's so kind of. Thank you so much.
Helpful, I think. Sam has asked if you both read crime when you're writing it, or is that too distracting?
I do, mainly because I mainly read crime anyway. I do sort of mix it up sometimes, but especially at the moment when I'm doing like my first plotted mystery, I found it really helpful to read some proper cozy crime plotted mysteries, so I can just sort of remind myself of the beats of where the story should be. I think that you learn so much from writing, from reading, like just from osmosis. So especially in terms of that structure, I've definitely found that helpful to sort of see.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it actually helps. It helps to read it when you're writing it, because sometimes I think you get so caught up in your own story and you're like, where's this twist going? And sometimes actually just like breaking away from your own, reading someone else's and being like, oh, like that's how it's done, or just taking your mind away from your own. It suddenly pings that you go, I can do that, and then this will happen. And I think there are just so many talented crime writers as well that you're like, I just want to read them all. So many books, so little time. It's the age-old problem.
And I tend to listen to a lot as well, like on Audible, as well as the ones I'm reading. So I feel like I'm always getting a double whammy and then just copying people. basically.
What have been your favourite reads of the year then so far?
Favourite read of the year in terms of crime, The Influencers by Sv Leonard is really good. It's her second book, and it's about it's about it's set at the Influencer of the Year awards, and the Stella Knight, who is like the big influencer that everyone loves, is found dead. And then it's up to Maggie, who's the protagonist, who's got a true crime blog, and she decides to try and investigate to figure out what happened. But it's really good, and it's got a brilliant ending, and it's just very clever. It's very Agatha Christie, but set in a very modern world, and that's why I really love that. That was really good.
Again, I feel like my mind has just literally gone blank of all of the books. I've spent quite a lot of this year reading and doing like my second one. So I feel like, my own. No, I'm joking. Yeah. I really enjoyed reading. I'm pretty sure it was The Couple Next Door, Shari Lapina. I read that one this year, which I know has been out before, but it was just so good. Yeah, honestly, Shari Lapina. I'm like, give me all your books.
Karen McKinley has said, could you explain the idea of reading as a writer? She's never understood that.
I think for me, so I think my writing came from reading. I was like a proper little bookworm as a kid, would love how swept away I got by it. And so then it sort of seemed like a natural thing that I would then progress to trying to create my own escapism. And I was always like imagining my own stories. And yeah, I think that, most of my writing I've learned through osmosis, really, through reading. And yeah, I think it does depend on the person, because I know some people who can't read their genre while they're writing because it distracts them. Which I think I understand, but I think my brain, almost like I need to check that I'm doing it right. Like I need a template to check that I'm doing it right. And then I'm like, okay, it's fine. I'll carry on doing that. And you do pick up ideas or sort of develop little things. And yeah, I think for me, and also bits of language, I think you kind of, the more you read, more kind of like bits of language and ways people to describe things and ideas sort of just come to you.
Yeah. I think I was very similar. I used to love Jacqueline Wilson, was my just absolute hero when I was younger. And I remember I used to always read, and I once wrote a story and took it into my teacher, and my teacher called my parents into school and was like, is everything okay at home? And I was like, like Jacqueline Wilson always wrote really hard hitting books. And I wrote like a story about parents divorcing, and she's like, is everything okay? And I was like, but it was that just kind of picking up, like you say, through osmosis, these kind of emotional stories. But I definitely think as someone, it was Gone Girl was the book that like twisted it for me, because I remember reading it and halfway through when the twist happens just being like, I need to talk to someone about this book. And I'd never really read a book that made me feel like that, and I think that was the bit that really got me into like thrillers and crime books, is just that moment where you're like, oh wow. And so I think that helps them reading other books. I always find like Lisa Jewell, how she always ends on another twist where you're just a bit like, oh, you've weaved that in so cleverly. I think, reading, I don't think I'm doing a very good job of explaining reading as a writer, but for me, it's just like picking up on different things and kind of what you like as a reader and how you kind of try to interpret that and incorporate that in your own writing.
And also, I find sometimes, like, I start reading a book and I think to myself, oh, I bet this is what's going to happen. And then it starts going off in a completely other direction. And I go, well, that would still be quite a good book. So I'll like note it down and I'm like, that. I'll twist that and I'll use it. What should have happened in that book, I'll use that for my own one day.
Yeah. Just like a bank of 100 ideas, but the time to write one.
Yes, always the way.
Yeah.
So as you're getting into your writing now, where are you coming up with your ideas? Do you just have a little diary or somewhere where you write down sort of future, like this could be the next book?
Yeah, I always seem to have like a few ideas of a story, and then I kind of have to wait for the setting to fall on me. I think that's why I write historical. Like I'm obsessed with the setting of it, and I think it really feeds into the story. So for example, for this one, that the hotel that I'm doing, I had COVID in November, and my dad is very sweet, and he like photocopied some sections of his favorite books and like put them through the letterbox. And one of them was from Stephen Fry's autobiography, where he talks about, it's the chapter where he talks about living in the Savoy. And it's so, obviously Stephen Fry wrote it, so it's just so rich in detail. And I just thought, that's it. That's the setting for this murder mystery in my brain that I wanted to write. I wanted to write a cyanide poisoning, but in a slightly different way. And I just thought, well, that's it. I'm done. That's the setting. And I just sort of kind of started going on it. And then there's some other, I've had ideas that I've got noted down from a few years ago, and I'm starting to get there. I think there's, at some point in the next couple of years, I might land on the right way to tell that story. So I think it's just a constant stream of nonsense that you note down, you go back to it, you go, oh, if I team that nonsense with that nonsense, because my view, I think, is about 3 different nonsenses that once they started working together, they created a full book.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like it's really random, as in, so like book 2, I remember reading about a case about like incel and like the incel community and like online and stuff, and that sparked that one, but it linked to another idea that I'd kind of had before, and then like the perfect victim thing, I was like, that's a good idea to just keep somewhere in the back of my mind. And you just have these random post-it notes. I have like 12 notebooks that I think you've got 1 page from different stories in different ones, and they kind of eventually will all tie up. But I always walk around with a notebook, always have a notebook with me just in case something comes. I'm not the notes on my phone person. I'm like, no, if I put it down on a pen and paper, then it's real.
I will do like notes on my phone, and then as soon as I get home, handwrite it. Because I'm the same as you. I have to sort of handwrite to make it real. It doesn't feel, it doesn't count. Got to be handwritten.
Definitely. Like the first chapter of any book or anything I've ever written, I have to handwrite it. I can't do it on a laptop first. I'm like, got to write it down, and if it feels like it's flowing, then you go to the laptop.
And my first like initial kind of character ideas, my first initial plan for where I want the book to go, I handwrite it all. Just like a little story, and then I'm like, okay, that'll be it. And then that's what I use to write a book.
Yeah, 90,000 words by hand is a lot.
Yeah. No, I've stopped short of that. I use the laptop for the actual typing, but
yeah.
So Sam has said she met Jacqueline Wilson and has a signed Tracy Beaker book.
Oh, Tracy Beaker book as well. Wow.
She says, have you any prized signed books?
Yeah, I've got a little collection going that I sort of, just whenever I sort of see either one that's signed in a second-hand book or that I've like got from Goldsboro. I mean, it was one of my, I had a signed copy of The Order of the Phoenix, which is my favorite Harry Potter. It's a bit tainted now with J.K. Rowling, but it was very special for a while. So I have that, and then I have I've got a signed copy of Freud on Food. So my day job is in food, so that's a really special copy. And then I also have a signed copy of Wool from the Wool trilogy, which is like a dystopian sci-fi one. I don't know if you know it, but I loved that trilogy. And then I saw in Goldsboro that they had a signed first edition, so I bought that as well.
Oh, a signed first edition as well. Yeah. Sam, my prized possession is also a signed Jacqueline Wilson book. I was like, ah! I met her on my 10th birthday. I went to an author talk that she did in Ilkley, and it was Midnight, the book Midnight she copied, and it says happy 10th birthday. And I was like, well, this is the best thing I will ever own. And it still is.
I've got a signed Charlene Harris book.
Oh.
That I love because of her cozy crime series. I think she writes some of the best books ever.
Mm.
Yeah. But I've signed one of her kind of cozy crime books.
That's amazing. I think it does mean a lot to have a signed one, and especially those ones from childhood, the Jacqueline Wilson, because I think what you read as a kid really does kind of help frame you. It's a shame that mine's a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say you can share Jacqueline Wilson, but I don't want to share.
It's not my 10th birthday, so.
It's true. Just mine.
Karen McKinley said she missed the start. Did we cover what the next books are about? I think we did. Do you want to recap what your next books are going to be about?
Yeah, so I'll give a different answer because it's not the one I'm working on, which was what the first question was. So my next book, book 2, which will be out, I think, end of January next year, is about, so it's set in the 80s this time in Hollywood, and it's about a woman who works for a real estate agency, like a real estate brokerage, and she gets sent up to this big house owned by this kind of eccentric heiress whose dad was big in the sort of Gilded Age of Hollywood. He was a producer, and her mum was a starlet, and all of this. And she now owns this house and loads of land. And this woman, Terry, is told to try and buy it for her company so they can develop it. And Audrey says that she will sell it to her as long as Terry spends the week with her. And then as she spends the week with her, she starts to learn that perhaps Audrey is not the nicest or sanest of people. So it's a bit like Evelyn Hugo, but dark.
Yeah, I was getting Evelyn Hugo vibes. So I was like, this sounds good.
But not a bit less romance and a bit more murder.
Just my kind of thing. Just my cup of tea. Again, I'm not so sure how much I'm supposed to say, but I feel like I'll just give the top lines. My main character is called Cassie, and basically months before her wedding, she finds out that her husband to be is cheating on her, and then she kind of uncovers a little bit more, but just basically finds out he is not at all who he says he is, and there is a lot of dark, twisted, kind of really dodgy behaviour on his part, and it's a bit like a revenge. It starts basically with his hand around her throat is how the book starts. So like it gets dark. It gets dark.
That tells us a lot about him already, just from the very first.
Yeah. I don't even know if I was supposed to say any of that, but like this is a nice safe space. So sneak previews.
To be edited, I think, is the disclaimer we'll put on all our things.
Yes.
Karen says she loves the sound of both of those.
Oh, amazing. That's great to hear.
Future sales going on.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, thank you.
While we're on the discussion about signed books, can people buy signed copies of your books?
Yes. I'll scribble on anything if you want to send it to me. I'll have to sign it. My dad made a joke that it's probably more valuable to have an unsigned copy of my book, because at the one point I just signed copies for my family. But my book is going into the My Chronicle book box for May, so that'll be the signed first edition copy in that box. So if you subscribe to that, you'll be able to get a box. And then on Tuesday next week, I'm going down to London to meet with my publishers, and we're going to do some signings around some London bookshops. So London bookshops, and I'll probably force myself into some Manchester bookshops as well, and make them have some signed copies from me. So London and Manchester for me, you'll be able to get some signed copies.
Oh, amazing. I mean, I've been personally signing them, but again, in Australia, and Australia postage is a nightmare, so I would avoid that. But Tea Leaves and Reads, you can buy kind of a signed book on there, and that's the one that's got the Coral Bay wax melt, and it's got a few little things based on the book in there. And then while I'm here, I'm thinking I might just show up in Bradford Waterstones and sign some, or like Leeds Waterstones. So they might stumble across the odd one. But yeah, like you said, I'm happy to sign anything. I'll sign you a receipt if you want.
And you're both so local to us. You need to do these Leeds and Manchester signings while me and Sam are around and have a coffee with us as well.
Yeah, that would be great.
Would love that.
Because
I'll always come up to Leeds and force myself into that Waterstones as well.
Yeah.
We are both Leeds and Manchester based.
Amazing.
This is perfect.
Yeah. I was planning on yesterday on publication day to go to my local Waterstones and sign some copies, but they didn't order very many copies in, and obviously all my friends' mums went in and bought them all out, so it was sold out before I could go in and sign anything, just because I grew up around here and all my friends grew up around here, and all their mums are just like, let's go get a copy of Steph's book. I was like, can you sign those? But now not.
It's a good feeling though, because you could be like, I sold out on publication day. Wow.
They think I'm like a huge deal, but I don't think that. I think it's just that a mum's group will always be very supportive.
Yeah.
we've got messages coming in. So Sam has said exactly the same thing as I did. That if you're Manchester or Leeds events, you need to let us know because we'll be there.
Brilliant.
David has said that he's really enjoyed the chat and wishes you all the best. He's probably getting notes for his chat. He's on with Sam very soon, so he'll be watching and imagining his answers, I think.
Yeah.
I'm glad. It's been so nice to chat. I'm having such a good time. I feel like I should have a glass of wine or something. You know.
I'll have one after. I've still got like half a bottle of champagne left over from yesterday, so I'll be on that tonight.
You should
definitely treat yourself.
You were more than welcome to bring a glass of wine along. It's fine. A glass of wine and letting us meet your dogs and like pets is always allowed.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mind before, but I had to chuck her out because a cat came in the garden and she started like barking quite loudly. So I was like, okay, out you go.
Yeah, I'm at my partner's parents, and if you've heard any barking, it's their dog, and I was like, oh, hey, they've been so good about it. Yeah, should have brought her along and been like, this is Dottie.
You should. People love meeting people's dogs.
Yeah.
I have found that, especially, she pops up and, mine does do some weird thing. You can sit in front of some bookshelves, and I was on a call with my agent like last week, and she was like frowning behind me, and I was like, what is it? She's like, I think your dog is climbing the bookshelves, and I was like, oh, Christ.
We've got 3 minutes left. Reminders about yourselves and your current books that are out. Show them off again and get a bit of advertising.
Jess, you go first and I'll get a copy of my book.
I won't take long, don't worry. Like, hi, I'm Jess. This is my debut, The Girl She Was Before. It looks like kind of the lasting legacy of a trauma like bullying. My main character, Nat, had a really horrific experience when she was at school, kind of reinvented herself as this perfect person, and then her biggest tormentor comes back into town at the same time as kind of the death/murder of her closest friends, and it's kind of how she unravels and deals with the past and the pain that's going on at the present.
This is mine. After Everything You Did, it came out yesterday, so it's out, and it explores the idea of nature versus nurture, and it's about a girl, she's like 19, so a woman called Rita, who wakes up in hospital after a car crash with amnesia, and she finds out she's one of the FBI's most wanted killers. So we find out who she is.
I'm 100% going to Manchester to find these signed copies, by the way. I'm like,
I will scroll anything you want on it.
This sounds
like Bradford Waterstones and get one of yours.
Yeah, we should just do an offer swap day. Like,
yeah. I think your Waterstone sounds like it might be prettier than mine.
Oh, it's the dream. Honestly, you'll see those photos and you'll be like,
right, I'm there.
Bradford Waterstones is probably the prettiest one there is.
Right.
Yeah.
On the list.
Worth a trip.
Yeah, not too far.
And then all that's left to say is thank you both for coming on.
Thanks
for having me. Pleasure.
Thank you for having us. I've had a great time.
Yeah, it's been lovely.
Best way to surrender